Welcome back, wizards. Wait, it's the wrong channel. Welcome back, you guys. This is the Prepared Mindset, and thank you guys for checking out the video. Today, I want to talk about something that we argue about all the time. And by we, I mean mostly me. In the comment sections, when I put out videos on 3 letters that seem to set people off more than anything else in our community, and that's CQB. Or close quarters battle. And it's something that's become a lot more popular in the last couple of years for civilians to learn and train, but it's also become something that's very divisive. It's something that for all the access to information that we have in this community, and for as strong as so many of us feel about restrictions to information by places like the government, we eat our own and tell each other, you shouldn't learn CQB, or you're a GBRS group wannabe, or fill in the blank of what other organization that you don't like because you personally don't think that CQB is important. And it's odd because we don't talk that way about small unit tactics, which is essentially, it's like that square rectangle thing where a square can be a rectangle, but a rectangle can't be a square. Small unit tactics can be CQB, but wait a minute. CQB is small unit tactics. Small unit tactics, though, are not always CQB. And it's weird that we put this imaginary line up between the two and talk about how it's okay to learn one, but not the other. And sometimes we don't even realize that we talk ourselves into a corner with this. So we're going to break it down. We're going to get into it today. Before I start this week's discussion, though, I want to make sure to remind you guys to hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell. We're dropping videos every week or every other week, trying to keep things moving as we're rolling through the summer. It's absolutely sweltering up here in Michigan. We're not used to this kind of heat at all, and I am not doing well. So make sure you guys smash that subscribe. Make sure you hit the notifications so you don't miss anything. And with that, let's jump into it. Okay, so CQB, small unit tactics, civilians, what we can do and what we apparently can't do. So what I find interesting is that sometimes people think that they're going to concede the point a little bit and meet that middle ground. Well, CQB is okay for one person because oddly, when we talk about learning how to fight and being effective where we fight, guys go straight to the woods. And that's wild because most of us statistically, like look at a map of, population densities in the United States, we don't live in the woods. We live in very urban and suburban areas, which are filled with structures, houses, which you should know how to effectively move through and effectively clear. And it builds on a whole bunch of other skill sets, which we'll get to here in just a moment. So some people will try to concede that point and they'll say, well, solo CQB is okay because you're only ever going to be on your own clearing your own home. So learning how to clear your own home is okay, but that's where we draw the line. You're never going to be with a buddy and you're never going to be with a team clearing structures. So you don't need to learn how to do that, which is wild because if we put that in the context of small unit tactics, nobody ever says you shouldn't learn how to do that with a team. We should apparently then, by the same logic, all be out here being John Rambo in First Blood, trying to kill Brian Dennehy. But I digress. So from my perspective, obviously, I'm a big proponent of us learning CQB, whether that's single man, 2-man, 4-man, because it builds on a lot of fundamental skills that we use on the flat range, off the range, and because of what it provides us. And there's a lot of similarities when we talk about things like small unit tactics, moving through opposing danger areas, right? How to move together, how to signal non-verbally, how to signal effectively verbally, things like that, angles of exposure, how to not flag your buddies, building an L-shaped ambush and things like that, which you do in CQB, you don't really call it that, but you also do it in small unit tactics. And so we put this imaginary lineup between the two concepts because it makes us feel better. Because the internet told us that we shouldn't learn how to be people that know how to do CQB. I don't really know what we call ourselves. But we shouldn't know how to do it, and learning it is silly. It's absolutely silly to build a gun for CQB. It's absolutely silly to go practice it, and it's silly to wear assaulter gear while also being somehow okay to wear all your sustainment gear and things out in the woods. Even though you don't live near the woods, you're not going to be traversing through the woods in the event of an emergency. I mean, you might, but it's unlikely, right? As unlikely as the emergency might be. Not saying we shouldn't prepare for that. but making the point here. So it's very weird. It's that we just create these artificial boundaries and things for ourselves. So when we talk about fundamental skills that on the flat range are very, very important, we talk about things like muzzle discipline. And in CQB, there's a certain threshold, I guess, that you can probably throw into the discussion. Say you might muzzle a friend if you're doing CQB. It's very inherently dangerous. The whole concept is dangerous. Guys, guns are dangerous. Yes, CQB elevates that risk just because of the environmental confines and the overall proposition of what you're trying to do. There's not really any getting away from that, but training this and learning this only makes you better. Additionally, it makes you better at info processing, which is a huge thing seemingly popularized by Lucas Botkin in the last 5 or 10 years since he started talking about it. He's not the one that came up with the concept. He's not the one that started talking about it. But because we watch Lucas and his videos, at least we used to, probably will in the future, RIP to his old company. But data processing, info processing is really important when we're talking about shooting, right? So shoots, no shoots, accuracy, things like that. And I think that CQB is a great example of how you take those skills and you build on them. Things like taking your rifle and being able to go to a low port position, as well as from the scanning position going to a high port position and maintaining visibility, not putting your arm in front of your face. Some people do it. These are things that you have to be able to do to be able to move a firearm effectively around your friends. And you do it often in CQB just because it's the requirement of the mission set. Yes, you also do it in small unit tactics, and you do it on the flat range as well. You have to pay attention to where the bullets come out. It's pretty common sense stuff, but we like to put up, again, those artificial boundaries on what makes sense and what doesn't make sense for us, what we can learn, what we can't learn, how we can and how we can't apply it. Just like apparently we can all learn gunsmithing skills to keep a platform like this going, but if we learn how to put a special sear in this thing, some people really, really get bent out of shape about it. And we're against that idea because we have rights and we love freedom, and I do too, unless we're talking about CQB, and then you don't have that and you shouldn't learn it, and you should be out in the woods or in the gym or any other thing that's not that. And it's not that I hate small unit tactics, it's not that I think there's no value there. I think there's a tremendous amount of value, and the guys that have actually done this stuff real world will agree you need both. And as you guys are sitting there getting ready to jump in the comments section about your tactics should, be built around your mission. Yeah, funny thing is you need to be able to move to your mission location, and then presuming that it's a building, you're gonna need to be able to clear your way through that, whether that's you on your own, you and somebody else, you and 3 other somebody else's or more. That takes both of those concepts and brings those two together. But we ignore that point because it's not convenient for the argument. Now, do I think that there are a number of unqualified people out there trying to pass themselves off as CQB instructors? Yes, potentially. Do I think there's a lot of really bad information out there on the CQB concept that people are propping up and promoting just because of their irrational emotional attachment to it, even from the time that they served in the military in the very early 90s because it's what they know? Unfortunately, yes, but we have that in all realms of our community. This isn't special. So when we talk about outdated shooting tactics, things like the old isosceles versus equilateral, when we talk about how we're shooting and things, we still have those arguments, and people still want to debate those points because they have that religious attachment to what they learned and what worked for them at the time. So it kind of starts to nullify some of the points. I think that it's dangerous to focus too much on any one subject without also maintaining other skills. So if you're only going to practice shooting, I think that's a little bit of a disservice, and you have to be able to move to the threat. Garrett at RAS Group did a number of posts and videos on, I think, YouTube and Instagram talking about, because he is a police officer, the importance of being able to move effectively to the threat, i.e. being able to prioritize and identify some semblance of CQB understanding, as well as being able to effectively put rounds on that target. So everything comes together and makes this all work. It's not that you can only focus on one or the other, and you can't touch this because you don't have that job or that title or that background or that fancy piece of nylon Velcroed to your sleeve. It's all relative, you guys. I think that it's one of my great passions for sure, but I think it's something that a lot of people have a lot of interest in, and for many reasons don't explore it because they get peer pressure, they get told on the internet that they shouldn't, and in many instances they simply don't have access to a place to train it, which I certainly can empathize with and understand. but it doesn't mean that you should not pursue that education, pursue that information. There's companies out there like Core Vision, like Orion Training Group, and a plethora of others that do a very good job of explaining these skills to people like you and I, civilians, and also law enforcement and military, but to civilians who want to learn this, who are dedicated to investing their time, their energy, and their own money to being better, to being more capable, and to being more effective. And then you can take that back and share it with your friends, and you can elevate the overall capability of the community around you. It's not something that needs to be gate kept on. It's not something that only a select few people should have access to. And maybe there's parts of it. Maybe there are parts of it that we shouldn't necessarily know very specific SOPs for very specific teams and agencies and things for safety reasons. I certainly understand that. But that's not a reason that people like you and I shouldn't have access to the fundamental concepts, and we can take those fundamentals. We can learn them and we can apply them to our own problem solving. At the end of the day, that's really what it is. Whether it's outdoors and you call it small unit tactics or small unit movement, or it's indoors and you call it CQC or CQB or structure clearance, you're understanding the fundamentals of movement, angles of exposure, what you're giving up for what you're getting. It comes back to a fundamental understanding. And when we look at these fundamentals, you guys, it allows us to solve problems. And yes, we can look at our own homes and we can identify how we would clear our home, how we would escape from our home, things of that nature. But that also leads to training scars, which is another big talking point within the community. We always like to avoid the training scars. So what's helpful is, as you understand these fundamentals, is if you are able to whiteboard your way through some of these exercises. If you're able to take a floor plan or a floor layout from anything. I'm currently reading a book on the Iranian embassy siege 1980 in London. And at the very beginning of the book, it actually gives you a layout of several of the floors of the embassy building there. And it's a great example of being able to take a layout like that, being able to sketch it out on a whiteboard and walk through how you as a singleton or as a pair of people, excuse me, or a team might move through that building. And if you guys read up on that and you talk about, well, that's just fantasy, you're not in the SAS. No, I'm not. And I'm not British, and, go America. But if you guys read up on it, there was an armed police officer who had his service weapon with him at the time. And I'm not saying this to be, one of these fantasy heroes. I'm just simply stating that in the moment, should you find yourself in that kind of a situation, or should anybody in law enforcement or military that's not a CQB designated job, right, find themselves in that situation, they can leverage these kinds of skill sets to be more safe, to save lives. And I think at the end of the day, that's all we're very interested in, is protecting ourselves, saving lives, defending ourselves and our families from tyranny. And this is just one piece of all of that. So let's talk about the fundamentals. Let's take a look at how we could break it down and why it's so important, whether you're armed or unarmed and you're trying to make a safe exit from a building. So for some reference here on fundamentals, guys, this is part of a floor plan layout. I'm currently reading this book here. This is The Siege by Ben McIntyre. This talks about the siege on the Iranian embassy in London in 1980. And when you open the book, it starts, as many of these historical texts do, where they have a number of maps to help you understand where in the city a lot of these events are happening, because they reference that. But this is unique because it does also give you some floor plan information here on 16 Prince's Gate, which is the address of the building, the Iranian embassy. Specifically, I'm looking at the second floor layout here, which I've drawn out the roughly half of it on the board here, so we can talk for a second about fundamentals and how you would use fundamentals to understand your angles of exposure to potentially escape a scenario like this, or just understanding CQB as a general concept, because I think a lot of times we look at it as something that normal folks just don't need or shouldn't have access to. So you can see here, you can have your doorways, right? You have stairs, crudely drawn, I understand, give me some grace, guys. But if we talk about having 4 people together in a room and understanding fundamentals of what you're giving up and what your concerns are, obviously moving out of a room, your doorways are a priority. Open doors are always more of a danger for you than closed doors, because closed doors, obviously they give you a level of concealment. And then dead spaces are even greater concern because they're usually in the room with you. And you want to make sure that before you move past that, you understand how. So if there was something in this room that you're trying to move past, something maybe here like a large bookcase or something of that nature, before we moved down the room past this, we would want to make sure that we position ourselves accordingly to see this area behind it, so that we're not walking past some kind of hazard, whether that's an armed individual or, I don't know, a trap or something. I really don't know. You could use your imagination to make up any number of things. But that all speaks to the greater fundamentals of structure clearance, your priorities of work and priorities of threats within a room. So when we look at something like this, knowing that you have 4 people, if this was from an assaulter's perspective, coming out of this room, you could put 2 people on each door looking out. You could stack them up so that you're maximizing your concealment, understanding that that's not cover, that walls, especially here in the continental United States, are basically just drywall. So you can conceal yourself, but obviously you can still get shot through the wall, which is why you need to understand movement, understand exposures and angles. So when we talk about things like panning, which a lot of people don't like for different reasons, carrying this semicircle path across the doorway here to get one side to the other, you can see a lot of what's in this room here, right? By taking that semicircle path while exposing as little of yourself as possible. Basically, you see them by the time they see you. If there were somebody here in this room, that's the idea behind panning. I know it's not always the right solution for every problem. It's a good skill to know. I know a lot of people don't like it, but again, fundamentally speaking, it is another tool that can be helpful in certain situations. So in these kinds of instances, understanding how you might navigate through this floor plan, through this layout, so that you can successfully move, whether that's you want to have somebody hold here as a 3-person team, you're going to move in. This is a corner fed room, so maybe you're going to have this guy come in and run the rabbit. As he's coming in, the next person's going to swing down, scan this corner here, and then you have 2 people addressing that threat individual or unknown individual potentially. And now since you have a 3rd guy, you can even have somebody push down as he comes in. These 2 pick this up, and then you have 1 person who can pick up this door, and you have security held from here and from here on unknown spaces, unknown doorways, which you have people coming in and out of over here, because this is all uncleared. So you have this doorway you'd be looking into from here. You can look into potentially the stairway, and this whole area here is all uncleared space, and you have all of this to get you to the stairwell to get from the 2nd floor down. So not going to get super in depth here. This isn't supposed to be a master class on CQB processes, but just to give you guys an illustration of how you can take things like historical texts and learn to kind of look at these objectively and break them down for yourself and try and figure out ways you would move through it, rather than just gaming the layout of your own home, where a lot of times people will understand that they have the upper hand because they know the layout in their home, and it gives them a false sense of security when we evaluate the overall capability of structure clearance. So this is just one example. You guys can do a whole lot with this, or even better, you can go take a course. There's tons of good companies that will teach you this stuff. They'll do it this way on a whiteboard, and then they'll also obviously have you do it out in person, but people learn different ways. Sometimes the whiteboard method is beneficial for some folks. The fundamentals, you guys, they're the same regardless of where you're at and what you're doing. Yeah, it might change a little bit if you're outdoors, you're crossing a busy road or maybe a shallow stream or something. It might be a little bit different. Yes, you might use different signals. You might move at a different pace. You're definitely, more than likely, going to have different gear, but a lot of the considerations, a lot of the processing is going to be pretty similar, honestly. So for that reason, I find it honestly very funny that we have the argument that people have the feelings that they do, that we shouldn't know how to move effectively through a building. Like, guys, we live in buildings. I can't overstate that enough, that we should know how to move through those buildings, especially if you find yourself at the gym, you find yourself at the grocery store, at school, at a doctor's appointment. We all know gun laws don't keep us safe. wherever you are may be a place where you have to employ these kinds of skills and understanding to safely escape. I'm not saying you're going building clearing. I'm saying how to read angles, to cross angles of exposure, whether it's a doorway, a closed door, things like that. There's a lot to it that makes it a very beneficial skill set, not just something that we put on for hype videos on YouTube, which I still love, just like everybody else. We need to look at it for what it is and what benefits it offers us as more prepared civilians that want to be more capable. We want to be more self-accountable and not depend on first responders, guys, because this is no shade to law enforcement, but if we look at the average response times for mass casualty events, school shootings, public shootings at malls. There was one here in Wayne County in Michigan just the other week, and a church security team was able to eliminate the threat before police arrived. We have to be our own first responders. And I know it's a very played out notion. It's a very annoying notion in a lot of instances because it's overused and it's misused to justify a lot of silly things. But this is part of it. Understanding how to move and maneuver through a structure competently and effectively and to a degree safely is just part of everyday life. So guys, hopefully this helps add some detail and helps add some context to what we're talking about. It may still be a very unpopular topic, and it may still be something that a lot of people get a lot of heartburn over because they believe in their heart and their soul that you'll never have to actually be effective with a firearm within the confines of a building. And that may be true. I don't know what the numbers are on it, but statistically, I'm sure it's probably very low. I also know that I wouldn't want to catch myself and let alone my family stuck in one of those situations, knowing I could have done something about it and didn't because people I've never met on the internet told me that I couldn't. So thank you guys so much for checking out the video. If you have thoughts, and I'm sure there's probably a lot, drop it in the comments section. I think bridging the gap and the understanding here is a really, really important part of the discussion, and sharing the thoughts, bringing it all together. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Again, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the notification. If you guys like these kinds of topics and these kinds of videos, I'll do more. I've got a couple in the hopper that I'm playing with the idea of getting out there. So thank you guys for watching the video, and we'll catch you on the next one.